In today's world, you're more likely to see military personnel in positions of leadership than professionals. They're becoming respected voices on leadership, resilience, and peak performance. Yet this new visibility brings an interesting challenge. But think about it. PTSD rates among special forces range from 16 to 20%, higher than in the general military population. Many operators find their toughest challenge is navigating life afterward while carrying the weight of their elite status. Despite their exceptional training and capabilities, these warriors face elevated risks of depression and substance abuse.
If you think about how many military or veteran influencers in general are under or have been under some type of allegation of adultery, domestic violence, stolen valor, fraud, lying about stories, the list goes on and on.
This gap between perception and reality matters more than you might think. When we view special forces through a simplified lens, we risk misunderstanding both their capabilities and their needs. These operators are exceptional, certainly, but they're also human.
We are not some bastion of moral superiority that you should be idolizing as the American public.
As we explore this complex landscape, we'll examine how the public image of special forces shapes everything from personal well-being to national security decisions. After all, shouldn't we understand the full story of those we ask to take on such extraordinary responsibilities? U.S. Special Forces are often portrayed as the ultimate warriors, noble, fearless, and unwaveringly heroic. Their exploits, both real and fictional, have long captured the public imagination. But the reality is far more complex. According to some special operations veterans, the true nature of their profession is a far cry from the romanticized image. One former SEAL describes the level of savagery in special forces as something most people can't fathom.
The biggest shock that all my new guys have when they get in the SEAL teams, in the Ranger Bat, in damn Green Berets, is I try to explain to them they are going to be managing serial killers. And the first phone call I get, all of them have made the same phone call. Holy shit, Jake, you weren't lying. All my officers say the same thing, man, shit. Because there's a level of fucking savagery, like people just don't understand the level of savagery that's going on right now in USO.
An ex-Green Beret puts it even more starkly.
First thing I'm going to tell you is the criteria of how a Special Forces soldier psychologically is looked for, okay? Every special operator, every single one, is on a sociopathic spectrum, and we look for it purposefully. A lot of people think that's crazy, but not really.
These are jarring claims. They cut against decades of Special Forces mythologizing in popular culture. But there may be some truth to them. A 2020 article in Byline Times mentions that Special Forces operatives are often referred to as high-functioning psychopaths and sometimes describe themselves as compassionate psychopaths.
Everyone is on the spectrum for sociopath. Listen here, man. I've been saying it for years. Nate just said it. We are screening for young men who have had massive amounts of trauma growing up and has turned them into a ravenous wolf. That's what we're looking for. Looking for guys that can win when their leg is missing. Okay? That ain't your average fucking run-of-the-mill bear right there that just loses a leg and keeps on trucking. All right?
That's nearly triple the incidence in the general population. Of course, the same traits that make effective special operators, fearlessness, aggressiveness, high stress tolerance, could easily be characterized as psychopathic in civilian life.
If you think about it, why? What do you need a Green Beret or a Navy SEAL for? You need men who can go do morally reprehensible things to other human beings for a good cause that can then be brought back, decompartmentalize what they've done, and be reintegrated safely into society. That requires some level of sociopathic mental behavior.
And most Special Forces soldiers serve honorably. Still, the discrepancy between public perception and the psychological realities of special operations is troubling, especially as these elite units take on an ever larger role in U.S. defense strategy.
In the SEAL teams, we have this awesome saying, I will trust you with my life, but I will not trust you with my money or my wife. And simple little saying, right? But when you step back and think about it, like I entrust this dude with my life every day, but I'll be damned if I let him take my wife to the grocery store when I'm on deployment. Because if he can bang her and bag it, he's gonna bag her up and bag it at the grocery store, okay? Same thing with my money. I know so many SEALs that have stolen money, it's absolutely ridiculous. I know so many SEALs that have sold equipment for money.
And here's another interesting fact. Special Operations Forces comprise just 3% of the U.S. military, yet they suffer over 80% of casualties in the ongoing war on terror. What does it mean for a nation to idolize troops specifically selected for sociopathic tendencies and then rely on them to project force worldwide? It's a question that grows more urgent each year. As the gulf between the myth and the reality of Special Forces grows ever wider. The rise of Special Forces influencers has amplified public fascination with these elite units to unprecedented levels. In the digital age, Special Forces have become more than soldiers. They're a global brand. But this influencer culture often traffics in a simplistic superhero archetype. The Special Forces operator as an invincible warrior, unburdened by fear, doubt, or vulnerability. It's a seductive image, but a misleading one.
Don't get me wrong. You need those men. America needs those men. These are the men that is break glass in case of emergency, that we can send to do the horrific things on America's behalf so that America as a station can be uplifted, whether that's through, morally right or wrong means for the overall benefit of America and the future of our kids.
In reality, even the most elite soldiers are not immune to the profound stresses and traumas of combat. Special Operations Forces and incidents of post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms. Reported PTSD rates of 16 to 20% among U.S. A rate higher than the general military population. Special Forces also face elevated risks of depression, substance abuse, and suicide.
But the influencers who are out there laughing and joking about how awesome it was for all the people they killed, I'll tell you this, I'm not going to judge you. The people who do that, there's only two reasons that they do that. No more than two. The first, they're a psychopath and they thoroughly enjoyed ending human life. That's what serial killers do. There's a lot of that. That exists. The second is the more common one, and that is they use that humor as a coping mechanism to deal with what they've done.
Special Forces soldiers have higher divorce rates than other service members, a testament to the strain their careers place on families. Yet these harsh realities rarely feature in the glossy narratives peddled by Special Forces influencers. Instead, They lean into the superhero mystique, projecting an image of unbreakable toughness and unwavering composure. This mythos can have real consequences.
Al-Qaeda, ISIS, the Taliban, we're not talking about good human beings, but slaughtering other human beings, whether it's Taliban or whoever, is not a morally positive thing. It may be justifiable, it may be required, but does not make you a good person for doing it.
It can make civilians underestimate the support that even the most elite warriors need to heal from the invisible wounds of war. And it can discourage operators themselves from seeking help for fear of tarnishing their invincible image. The Special Forces brand isn't just about projecting an image of invincibility. Increasingly, it's about monetizing that image. The past decade has seen an explosion of former operators leveraging their elite status for profit. From social media sponsorships to speaking tours, fitness programs to survival gear, Special Forces influencers have built lucrative post-military careers trading on their combat credentials. Some have even parlayed their fame into movie or TV deals, blurring the lines between real-life warriorship and Hollywood myth-making.
One of the worst things I see, and this is really because of Hollywood, sort of the glamorization, the glorification of war and combat and killing.
This trend has raised eyebrows within the special operations community. Some veterans worry that the rush to cash in on operator cachet is eroding the quiet professionalism that once defined their craft.
It used to be you did your job, you came home, and you kept your mouth shut. Now it seems like every other guy is trying to build a brand around how many people he's killed.
There's also concern that the influencer economy incentivizes embellishment and self-aggrandizement. In a crowded market, the temptation to burnish one's legend with exaggerated or even fabricated tales of battlefield derring-do can be powerful. A striking number of high-profile Special Forces influencers have been accused of misrepresenting their military records or exploits. Some have even been exposed as outright imposters, having never served in special operations at all.
Why does the military, the Department of Defense, not only allow this, but, and I'm not going to say just encourage it, but they actually help these dudes pull this off, okay? As we did with the video about Mark Luttrell admitting that the U.S. Navy, basically just handed him the book, got him a PR team, got his lawyers, sent him on his way, and told him, you're the new greatest Navy recruitment tool out there, okay? Well, and there you go. That's the reason why, okay? You think about all those books that I showed you, all those movies that I showed you earlier, those are massive propaganda recruitment tools for the United States military.
But even when their credentials are legitimate, some argue that influencers peddling the operator mystique for profit are doing the public a disservice by reducing the Special Forces experience to a marketable archetype. The warrior is the ultimate alpha male. They risk obscuring the more complex, often painfully human, reality of military service. The lionization of Special Forces isn't just a matter of individual operators' well-being or professional ethics. It has broader implications for how we, as a society, understand and relate to our military. When we mythologize elite soldiers as superhuman warriors, we risk fostering a skewed, almost video game-like perception of combat. The reality of warfare, its moral complexities, its psychological toll, its often tragic human costs, can get lost in the swagger and heroics.
We are trained to lie, cheat, and steal, and win at all costs. Win with limited resources, build armies with groups of 12 people. None of this translates back to the civilian world of being a good person. There is a lot of stuff that happens in all of these special operation communities that I tell folks would crumble normal individuals. It will crumble you down to your knees, some of the stuff you have to do to win in an austere position.
This is especially concerning given the increasingly central role special operations forces play in U.S. foreign policy. Over the past 2 decades, the remit of these elite units has expanded dramatically. They're now deployed in over 80 countries, often with little public scrutiny or congressional oversight. As special forces have become the go-to tool for policymakers, their missions have also evolved. Increasingly, they're tasked not just with high-stakes raids, but with complex politically sensitive operations like training foreign militaries and influencing local populations. These are roles that require nuance, cultural sensitivity, and a keen understanding of the human terrain. Qualities that don't always square with the brute force, door kicker image celebrated in popular culture.
You can't handle the truth! Son, we live in a world that has walls, and those walls have to be guarded by men with guns. Who's gonna do it? I have a greater responsibility than you can possibly fathom. You have the luxury of not knowing what I know, that Santiago's death, while tragic, probably saved lives, and my existence, while grotesque and incomprehensible to you, saves lives. You don't want the truth because deep down in places you don't talk about at parties, you want me on that wall. You need me on that wall, or the inclination to explain myself to a man who rises and sleeps under the blanket of the very freedom that I provide, and then questions the manner in which I provide it. I would rather you just said thank you and went on your way.
When we reduce special operators to action heroes, we not only diminish their true range of skills and responsibilities, we also risk giving policymakers and the public a distorted sense of what these forces can achieve and at what cost.
I didn't feel bad about any of those things at the time. I didn't regret what I did at the time. I don't feel bad about them years later, and I don't feel bad about them now. I don't regret them. I don't lose a second of sleep over any of that. That is not the type of person that you should look at as a role model, and I'm not rare.
The danger is that special operations become a catch-all solution, a way to project power without the political risk or public scrutiny of full-scale deployments. The reality is that even the most skilled special operators can't substitute for clear strategy, informed policy, and honest public debate. When we mythologize these troops, we make it easier to deploy them without due consideration for the long-term consequences. The allure of the Special Forces mythos is understandable. In a world of complex threats and moral ambiguities, the idea of an elite warrior caste, unburdened by doubt or vulnerability, holds a powerful appeal. But as we've seen, this myth does a disservice to the very real humans who wear the uniform. By idolizing special operators as superhuman, we risk diminishing their true sacrifices and struggles. We make it harder for them to seek the support they need to heal from the traumas of war. And we set them up for crushing disappointment when they inevitably fail to live up to the impossible standard of the perfect warrior. But the costs extend beyond the individual soldier.
When you're seeing these guys, I have no issue. You want to sell shooting courses, leadership courses. Now, if you want to buy these people's courses to take their firearms training, learn from their experience, learn from their leadership. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. But again, do not put your heroes on a pedestal. It's the famous saying of never meet your heroes because you'll always be let down. That is the exact same thing here.
When we mythologize special forces, we also risk distorting our national security priorities. We make it easier for policymakers to deploy these troops without fully considering the long-term strategic implications or potential for blowback. So how do we move forward? The answer lies in embracing the full, complex humanity of our service members. We must learn to honor their skill and sacrifice without putting them on an inhuman pedestal. For special operators themselves, this means having the courage to be vulnerable, to share the unvarnished realities of their experiences, even when it clashes with the superhero image. It means seeking support when they need it, without fear of stigma or judgment. For policymakers and military leaders, it means fostering an informed public dialogue about when and how these forces should be used, grounded in a clear-eyed assessment of their capabilities and limitations. And for the American public, it means learning to see special operators not as action figures, but as human beings. By extending our support and empathy to all veterans, not just those with the most daring tales of battlefield exploits. Ultimately, demystifying special forces is about remembering a fundamental truth: that warfare, even at its most elite levels, is a human endeavor, with all the messiness and fallibility that entails. Only by grappling with that reality can we make wise choices about how, when, and whether to use military force. And only by seeing the humans behind the uniforms can we truly honor their service and sacrifice.